Welcome back to another episode of Deep Quotes. I'm D.
I'm App.
I'm Pod.
And today we have a quote around the case of Georgia kind of trying to copyright their laws or protect it, hold it behind a paywall to some degree. So the quote that we're using to sum this up is, why would we allow the official law to be hidden behind a paywall? And for a little bit of extra background on this, effectively, the state of Georgia was suing a company because that company posted the law with annotations around the law, so basically written portions of the discussion about the aspect of the law that was published. So not just the specifics of here's what is legal and what is illegal, but some of the discussions around how that came to be. That's my understanding of it. And so what Georgia is saying is that those annotations are protected under copyright because of the person that wrote them, and that the annotations weren't officially approved by the government, but the laws were, so that only the annotations are the part that can be protected under the paywall, even if they're posted together.
Yeah, and also that as part of that, Georgia officially recognizes those annotations as being a part of their official law. It's kind of weird.
Right.
Of like, the unannotated version is not inherently up to date and is not published by itself directly from the state of Georgia. It's the
official one is...
official one has those annotations from LexisNexis, but they're not legally binding. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of blurry lines here.
Yes, for sure.
So there's, I think, a very simple interpretation of this that completely nullifies Georgia's position. If there are government officials, if the annotations are direct quotes or direct discussions or writings of government officials on an official law in the United States where the government and laws are supposed to be public, they are public. They cannot be protected through a paywall or saying only certain people can view this, or you can only view this if you pay. No, if this is the law that has to be followed, and this is how that law will be interpreted, that needs to be public knowledge so that people can actually obey the law. If you're hiding how the law is going to be interpreted, then you are hiding information from people that will allow them to follow the law, which is in some ways equivalent to making it more likely that people will break the law.
Mm-hmm.
So saying, no, you can only see these annotations and seeing the interpretations of the law if you pay us is like saying, pay money, or who knows, maybe you'll end up breaking the law. I guess we'll have to find out.
Mm-hmm.
It seems really extortionist and like you're trying to make people criminals.
Yeah. I mean, it's like if your local town had a rule that said like, you can have 2 dogs of some type of breed. We won't tell you what the breed is that we do or do not like. I guess just roll the dice and decide what type of dog you want.
Sure, like the only state-accepted breeds, but maybe the state-accepted breeds weren't officially determined, but in the annotations, they would say, the dogs that we're looking at saying are not permitted are bulldogs and pit bulls.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't mention that in the official law because it wasn't made official law yet at the time of the posting, but it was an interpretation, so people need to be able to learn, hey, I have both of these dogs. I'm under the letter of the law, but under the annotations, it's in discussions, or like we're likely in the future when the law goes into effect, these will be the types of dogs that are forbidden.
Mm-hmm. And so like you could very easily not know what the rules are because they're not explicit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up in a case of, well, you're breaking the rules.
Right, you didn't even know what the
But
rules
they
were in the
didn't
first
exist.
place.
Right, and I think this is the biggest risk with this particular case is it's letting paywalls or government secrecy to encroach on what is and isn't legal.
Mm-hmm.
That you're getting closer and closer to, well, if annotations of the law released by the government can be hidden, what other portions of the law can be hidden? And the risk in that is, again, as we've been saying, if people don't know the law and if people don't have access to know what the laws are, without paying, if you don't have the capability to pay, if you're poor and you have very minimal funds to spend,
Or this paywall is just massive, say
Which
$1 million
it's,
to
well,
look
it's
at this
hundreds of dollars as far as we know what it is.
Even hundreds of dollars is
that's
high.
really expensive
Yeah,
to
that
say, hey, I want to have a plant in my house. I want to know if that's illegal. And you find something about growing without a farming license, and you want to know what that is. If that's protected behind a paywall, am I going to spend a couple $100s so that I can grow a flower in my house?
Mhm.
And then if you do, and it ends up being against the law, but you could only find that out if you had paid the paywall, that's effectively the government keeping the laws from you.
Mhm.
And the only reason to really do that is, number one, at least that I can see, number one, extorting the citizens for money, trying to pull a profit, which if the way that the government should get money is from taxes, not from extortion of, hey, it'd be a shame if you did something illegal. You better pay us money to make sure that you don't do anything illegal. That's extortion and abusive to the citizenry. Or if they want to be able to make up laws on the spot. And this is something that, particularly in authoritarian regimes, we saw it in Soviet Russia, where people would come to your door and under certain circumstances, when you're getting arrested, why am I getting arrested? You don't have to worry about that. You broke the law. We know you broke the law. And because the government is correct in this regard, you're being arrested for the law that you broke. It doesn't matter that you know what law you broke.
Mhm.
What matters is that it was broken. And it allows for the government to have a more authoritarian control.
Well, I could also see this being abused by like shady landlords as an example, going back to the dog example. Let's say that you know, as a landlord, that the only ones that are banned in this area are pit bulls. But you can convince your tenants that, oh, I don't like Great Danes, so I'm going to tell my tenants that they can't have Great Danes because they are illegal, not because I don't like them.
Not all dog breeds are permitted, so you can only
Right.
have these dogs. And so, or they could even imply some dogs aren't permitted legally, which is why I don't allow Great Danes and pit bulls.
Yep.
It's like,
It makes
well,
it so much easier to twist the laws to fit
Exactly.
your narrative.
exactly. And so people need ready access to what those laws are. Even if that's, hey, you have to go down to town hall and look at the copy of the law. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like it may be annoying to have to go to a government office to be able to look at the laws, but modern times, most of the time you can also go to a library and the laws are available online. Those are also going to be updated. You can search them and you don't have to wait your turn for a physical copy of the law.
Mm-hmm.
And in the United States, at least, the law has to be publicized. And if the annotations are important to the interpretation of the law, those also need to be publicized along with the law.
Yeah. And like Georgia's case here is that, well, the legally binding parts aren't in the annotations. It's just commentary on what we mean by the legally binding parts, but they're official as well.
But if
Right. I think the official part is what makes it tricky is, okay, if that commentary is official and it has something that's actually important to understanding the law, then I don't know if I'm breaking the law or not.
And I think more importantly, if let's say you break the letter of the law, or that it's in question whether or not you broke the letter of the law, and you're in a legal case where you're trying to defend your position, one of the things that they could look back to is the annotations saying, well, when it was written, what was the intention? And you can base the legal standing that you have off of that intention. The annotations and the officially published annotations, which again, Georgia is trying to say the annotations can be hidden behind the paywall. Those annotations could be used in a court of law to say, well, here's what the intention was, and you broke the law according to the intention. Therefore, we're going to uphold the intention of the law and codify it. And since you broke that, we may be able to pin you because you broke the letter of the law, even though it was questionable what the letter of the law was. They may end up siding against the person. Now you could potentially have an argument against that of ex post facto, that if a person does something and then it becomes illegal, they cannot be charged with it because it was legal when they did it.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was something on the books saying only certain types of dogs are permitted, but it doesn't say which types of dogs, and which types of dogs become illegal later. It's questionable depending on how good of a lawyer you get, and if you're particularly poor, you may not have access to a good lawyer, and you may lose that case.
Yeah. Or if you have a mixed breed and the annotations specify like how much of this particular breed is okay, that would also be a case of like, well, it's a quarter pit bull.
Right.
I'm just using dogs because it's an easy
Yeah.
easy example.
So yeah, I think that having public access to laws is critical for a free state. In authoritarian states, honestly, the more secret the laws, the more power the government has over the people. So it's good for an authoritarian state. It's bad for a free state.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely agree with that.
So having it behind a paywall
Yeah.
or having laws hidden is good for authoritarian.
Yeah. And something else I just thought of, say you're opening a small business in Georgia. Does that mean that the first step of things you do is you go pay the hundreds of dollar fee to LexisNexis to get an actually official copy of the state law? Because if you're a small business, you need to know
You need to know all the things.
everything.
Sure. And
More so than an average citizen.
I can see if you're looking for, I want to take a copy of this and publish it somewhere saying, hey, look, I am definitely following the law, that it's not legally required to do that, but saying, I want a state-sanctioned copy of this with like a state seal on it. That's going to take work from the side of the government, and maybe, sure, you may have to pay a fee associated with that, but that's not what people are actually looking for. They're saying, I want to know what the law is. Tell me what the law is, and tell me how that will be interpreted in the courts. And protecting that or hiding that behind a paywall is hiding critical information, preventing people from being able to follow the law.
And in extreme circumstances, that just means everybody's going to live in fear because you don't know what the police are going to try to enforce.
Which it is a good thing to an extent if you're looking at it from the perspective of we want people to be more cautious and not try to tread the line on breaking the law. So if they only know what the letter of the law is, they don't need to know about the interpretation or the kind of wishy-washiness aspect of it to say, hey, here's the law. Don't try to get close to breaking that law or try to straddle the line. Stay away from it. Follow the law. Be a good sheep. To an extent, that encourages people to stay on the good side of the law and not even get close to breaking the law.
But like going back to the dog example, certain breeds are banned, right? And again, for those listening, this is entirely me making up a scenario.
Actually, in some countries, like
in some countries,
in the UK,
there are dog bans.
I believe pit bulls are banned.
I know, but I'm saying that Georgia, this is not official Georgia law.
Sure.
But let's say that their law said like certain breeds are banned. Well, if I don't know what those are, then if I'm trying to be as careful as possible, I may choose to not get a dog at all or to stick to breeds that are like absolutely, if you ban a golden retriever, you have no soul.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, that to the point that I was making, if you say, oh, just don't straddle the law, okay, I just won't get a dog. That's as far away from the law as you can get, is just don't get a dog or don't get a pet. So in that regard, it doesn't really make sense that you should don't try to push up to the law, but then again, the law is supposed to be there to say, here are the limits of what will be tolerated by others.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's not meant to be wishy-washy. It's meant to be the be-all, end-all of here is specifically what will be enforced. And if the annotations are part of interpreting what will be enforced, that needs to be included in what's public if you value publicly posted laws and the citizenry being able to follow the laws by knowing what they are.
Yeah, and like also the thing is that people wouldn't be able to know if someone else is breaking the law, right?
Mm-hmm. If I need to report a crime, I need to know what crimes are reportable or could be reported.
Exactly.
Or if like my local police department is breaking the law around them of like, oh yeah, they broke into my house, they did not announce their presence. Like if I don't know that because I don't have access to that information because it's behind a paywall, It's ripe for abuses.
Now, what about, I think, a different aspect of this that we haven't really touched on too much? What about the idea of the people that are working in the government and adding these annotations and putting them together, trying to be able to make money off of that so that they don't have to continue increasing taxes? That taking taxes to be able to pay for something is one thing, but if you have the opportunity to say, most people probably won't need to look at this, for the few people that do, we can make a little bit of money on it to help augment the work that goes into writing down those annotations, computerizing them, and posting them. There is work associated with that. Should that be done through taxes or through paying directly?
I think that's tricky because on the one hand, you don't have a whole lot of people who really need those detailed annotations.
Mhm.
But on the other, if we're considering them part of the law, that should be available to everybody, even if I may not need to look at it.
Mhm.
That you're saying it's just an integral part of the law, so if you're writing the laws, that is what you're expected to do as part of your job.
Right.
Or, we could do the Georgia actually calling their unannotated version of the law the official version of the law, adding in any detail that maybe
Necessary.
would be necessary but is not necessary because it's in the other half of it, and then have LexisNexis just sell their legal annotations as a separate thing.
Saying we're lawyers and here is how we would interpret this law and here's how we would defend you in court.
Yeah. So that it's more of a legal, if you are in a position where you're getting in trouble with the law or you're a lawyer or something, you would care about that half of it, but the average citizenry only cares about the letter of the law plus any really relevant details. Again, going back to the dog case, knowing what those breeds are, but maybe not having a background on why those breeds are that way, because I don't really care about that.
Right. And I think a critical aspect of what you were saying is if a non-governmental organization wants to add their own annotations, I think that's different. Here's how we would try to defend you or try to prosecute you is very different from saying, here's what the government says about it. If you're being paid by the government, that means you are a government official, and what you're saying about the law, particularly writing that has legal backing in a free state, that needs to be known, or that should be known according to the modern interpretations of most governments in the free world. In authoritarian worlds, that's a completely different ballgame of all that matters is codifying what is legal and not legal, and then it can be prosecuted regardless of whether or not the people know it. Because in authoritarian regimes, you kind of want the people to be more afraid of doing things so that they are only doing things that are actively government sanctioned and saying, the government says this is good, you should focus on doing this, don't worry about doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And in that regards, it does make sense that in authoritarian governments, it's things come down from the government of telling you what to do. You don't have to really make as many decisions as you want. If the government says, hey, you should all own a dog for protection against whatever the government deems is a danger, they're saying, have these dogs. As opposed to, yeah, we don't care if you want to have a dog, you can have a dog, but make sure that you clean up their poop. It's compulsory of saying, do this versus saying, don't do this. And I think authoritarian regimes probably are more likely to say, do this, as opposed to free countries saying, don't do this.
Yeah, that definitely makes it very different.
And different types of interpretation. So, any other points you guys want to add?
No, I'm good.
All right. And I think we'll call it there. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you guys next time.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to this discussion. Your interest really means a lot to us. If you want to help support this podcast and our goal of sparking discussions and bringing people together, check out how to contribute in the description. Happy deeping!
The content of this podcast does not reflect the views and opinions held by anyone involved. We will frequently be playing the devil's advocate strictly for the purpose of exploration of ideas and not as an endorsement of any subsequent action. We condemn all acts of violence other than those of self-defense against physical harm.